Hey, folks, just trying to get lined up here a little bit. Everything's out of alignment today. Don't know why that is. There we go. Kind of. All right. How you doing tonight? Good to see some of you here. Deb, you were very early. Sorry, that's because I actually messed up something somewhere. I'm sure it's user error. I'm not admitting that I did something wrong more than I'm saying I probably did. In posting the notice for tonight's show, and it was crazy because I did something and it went live right away, but I wasn't broadcasting anything. My camera wasn't on, my mic wasn't on, but it was apparently broadcasting. And Deb, you caught that. You came in live about 20 minutes ago, so it's good to have you here. Lewis, good to have you here as well. Chad, good to see you. Cat Nine Tails, good to see you as well. And Michelle, glad to see you. Fran. And I got to tell you guys that tonight, kind of a not deeply researched topic tonight, but one I've talked about over the years. And it was just kind of a last minute. I said, I wasn't sure if I was going to do anything tonight, but now I am because of a little family event that took place this evening. And it prompted me to think about, hey, maybe I should do something too. Trapper Mike, how you doing, sir? And Michelle, I already said hi to you. Kathy, good to see you. And good to see everybody coming in. Mark, good to see you, brother. And tonight, earlier in the evening, we did what is traditional around the Roberts household, although not as traditional. I changed that. It's traditional because we do it every year. Just like every holiday, we have certain traditions we follow through, which I think is important for family life. It's having those traditions and those things that you want your kids to remember as they grow up. You want them to hopefully practice because you think they're neat traditions. Some of them involve religion or spirituality or family history or whatever it may be. But our tradition tonight, of course, with the coming Easter holiday on Sunday, is Easter egg coloring. And so as we were doing our Easter eggs, it made me think back to the days when I was a kid. And I had a stepfather who I've mentioned on the show before. He was married to my mother when I was about 3, I think. And they had my sister together, and then they were divorced when I was 6. But during that time, and I knew him most of my life until he passed away a few years ago. But he was a Ukrainian man named Vasil Nikolajenko. I just like saying his name. And same number as the letters in Mississippi. Well, when I was a kid, they used to play these cartoons on television early in the morning. And it was Follow the Bouncing Ball. And I mean, they were old cartoons from the 40s and the 50s. One of them was teaching you how to spell the word Mississippi. Mississippi. And that's how they'd spell it. And I seemed to pick that up with my stepfather's last name. Nikolajenko. So that's how I always remember. I wouldn't have forgotten his last name. But when I was a young kid, Nikolajenko. How did we spell that? And everybody called him Nick. But he was Ukrainian and very old world Ukrainian. He never lost his heavy accent. His circle of friends, his social circles, were all around the Ukrainian community in the Minneapolis area. And they all went to a certain church in the Minneapolis area, a Ukrainian Orthodox church. And but they had the tradition of coloring Easter eggs at Easter time that they brought with them from the old world. And I will mention this, that Nick, my stepfather, and his parents were all prisoners in one of Stalin's concentration camps in the Ukraine back in the late 50s. And so they emigrated to America and sought asylum here from Stalin and the havoc he was wreaking in the Soviet Union. And so let's see. I'm just looking to see if anybody's got any comments here as I'm going along. I think Easter was when Jesus was really born, says Cat O' Nine Tails. I think you're probably not far off, and I'll tell you why I think that. And maybe you can tell me why you think that. But I'll give you some good reasoning here that I think. So tonight we colored Easter eggs. They're nothing like your Ukrainian Easter eggs. While you're sitting there on your computer, if you've never seen a Ukrainian Easter egg, just go look at, call up a Google search and put in Ukrainian Easter egg and see what comes up. And this has been a tradition that's been around for many centuries. And this Coptic origins and Orthodox origins and so on. And intricate designs. Some of them are masterful pieces of art. And I was telling my kids tonight as we were coloring eggs, I said, this is kind of how they did it in these Ukrainian Easter eggs. I said, which are very intricate and designed. I said, but we're doing kind of the same thing with crayons and eggs. And then we draw a picture in crayon, we dip it in the dye, and we'd pull it out, and I'd take a lighter and I'd melt off the crayon wax, and it would leave white, and some of them left their color, some of my kids. But I'll show you my big Easter egg. Now, this is, I know you don't want to confuse this with some of the museum quality Ukrainian Easter eggs out there, but this is the one I did this evening. Dun, 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 dun. To boldly eat hard-boiled eggs like no man has eaten them before. So there's my my Easter egg for tonight. And I did a couple of them like this. Oh, it's got the Enterprise on the backside. You can see that. Intricate crayon drawings on egg. So that was my Easter egg. And having done this, and being rather lighthearted, maybe a little glib about it, maybe a little sarcastic about it as I was doing it, and my kids and I doing these, my wife doing them, and we're not really doing anything religious. We're not doing anything of a spiritual value. And I said, has the custom degraded that much from what it used to be that it no longer has meaning? Now, as most of you know, I'm agnostic, and my wife is probably pretty much follows the same footsteps as I do. And we are unchurched, and we don't go to church even on Easter at this point. But whenever I get to a holiday like this, it makes me think about my past religion, my past spirituality, the things I used to believe that I don't hold close to the vest anymore. And so when I did this, I thought, this is an empty, vain, vapid, meaningless, hollow ritual. Coloring an Easter egg with a Star Trek command insignia on it and the Enterprise. Oh, thank goodness it's hard boiled, huh? And here's some of the ones, like these. These are what my kids did. I mean, things like this. And you look at these and you say, is that an eyeball? It's my son's. The little kids would do, I can't get these out of the containers. oh, my son. Here's one from my son. Now, you find the deeper esoteric meaning in this. There's a tank, and it's firing tank missiles going through airplanes and seeking out a bomb that it's going to destroy. So, my son's Easter egg, one of them, tanks shooting shells. Let's see. Oh, this one's kind of pretty. I think this is my daughter, Rowan, who tends to be very artistic. And so she did this little egg. And I'm only showing you these, not to say, hey, look at what my family did. It's to say, hey, look at what my family did. Now let's talk about the meaning behind doing these types of things. My wife, my lovely wife, did this one right here. There you go. There's an Easter egg if I ever saw one. Now, who is that? Is that, as Jeff Dougherty might say, is that Plastic Jesus? Is that the God within? Who is that? And on the backside, it's got a little different face. So my wife did that one, nice and purple. She loves this because it turned out so purpley. So it's a royal egg with that face on it. That looks like a jack-o'-lantern face. So the reason I'm showing you these, and I'm asking these questions, and there's a whole bunch more here, and they all pretty much look the same. And, the kid's just doing cool stuff. Drawing, here's Ellery, 4 years old, just lines and crayon all over, and dipping it in the dye. And that was fun for them. But other than celebrating Easter, this has no meaning in my family at the moment, because we are not following a certain religious sect or a religious practice. But for them, what has Easter become? My kids have always known Easter to be a time when you have Easter eggs, you do Easter egg hunts, you get jelly beans. I think my 4-year-old today said something about Rainey's like, what happens on Sunday? Well, we go find Easter eggs and we eat jelly beans and candy. Oh, candy. And all of that. So this is what it has become, the Easter Bunny. The Easter Bunny to me is the ruination of old spiritual traditions, if you will. And it has become an Americanized commercial tradition. You go walk through Target or Walmart or any of the department stores and you find Easter baskets, fixins to make Easter baskets. I don't know how much money that industry brings in for the holidays, but I'm pretty sure it's companies that do Christmas stuff and Halloween stuff and all of that probably also have their Easter stuff they put out, all these companies out there. And, what's the... I wonder what the profit is on green plastic grass that goes into an Easter basket, or a multicolored fake basket, or big bucket baskets now that have everything from a basketball in them, or toy trucks, RC cars, dolls, things like that, action figures, all of this kind of stuff. So now I bring this up because, to me, I look at this over the last few years, and we all know, and we've all said it ad infinitum till we're blue in the face. We complain about the commercialism of Christmas and holidays and things like that. And the more it goes on, I'm seeing that Easter has done the same thing. Who I see not quite as affected by that is at the same time as Easter, and Cat O' Nine Tails, this will tie into something you were saying, is the fact that past trial and his crucifixion. He was crucified according to the New Testament scripture. He was crucified at Easter time, and Easter time, at Passover time. And anybody out there know what Passover is without looking it up off the top of your head? Do you know what Passover is? What was that celebration? It was the Passover of, and this will fit neatly into what we were talking about with the Exodus and Moses the other day, is Passover time is when the plague of the death of the firstborn, the 10th plague of Egypt, just before the Exodus, actually the night before the Exodus began, where Moses tells all the people, take lamb's blood, take a twig of hyssop, dip it in there, and wipe the lamb's blood on your doorposts and your lintel. And the angel of death, when he comes tonight, will pass over your house. And so that's where Passover came from. And they had the quick meal that they put together because he said, pack all your shit, get ready to go. And we're going to have this quick Seder, this what's become the Passover Seder, this quick meal. And then we're out of here in the morning. And sure enough, that's what happened. And so Passover has been held at the same time every year. The interesting thing is that Easter, I think, obviously falls on Passover, but Jesus' birth, at least in accordance with the biblical story. Now, I don't know if he existed the way we think he did. There's a historical Jesus factor to all of this. You can have the faith factor in Jesus, but does the history match up? There are some serious holes in the game. And yet, the birth that he has announces that the shepherds are in the hills watching their flocks, and lo, you remember Linus from the Peanuts, Charlie Brown series, and lo, the angel of the Lord appeared unto them and said, "Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy." And they're out to these shepherds. They announce it. Well, the shepherds are close in enough to Bethlehem that they make that journey into the manger scene that night, according to the story, according to Dr. Luke, who wrote the book of Luke, the Gospel of Luke, and the book of Acts. And so they make this trip in, and here's a couple of points to keep in mind. First of all, they have this census going on, which there's no historical record for it, but according to the biblical account, Joseph and Mary and everybody in Israel had to return to their hometowns for a census. That sounds like an odd way to take a census, but that's the way they did it according to this tale. And when they got there, the town was so packed and so full because Bethlehem is only about 6 or 7 miles from Jerusalem. And I believe it was Passover time. Everybody's coming to Jerusalem already for Passover. And the little towns and hamlets all around Jerusalem get absolutely packed to overcapacity during that time, because people would come. And now what would happen at Passover time? Every family would have to offer up a lamb for the atonement for sin. And so the sheep were kept not in the distant pastures, way out in the mountainous regions, but they were brought closer into towns like Bethlehem, the little towns that surrounded Jerusalem. So the very fact that the shepherds were close to Bethlehem tells you they were moving the sheep in, most probably for Passover. And there are other reasons in that, of course. Kat, you're talking about the story of Isis and Osiris and Set. Yes, I'm not sure what your context is there. However, if you're trying to compare the Passover story to that, or the birth story, I think they're similar, but I don't think they're copying each other. I don't think the Christian story copied that. However, I will say that perhaps placing the dates on things. Jesus was born on December 25th. That's bullshit. He was not born on December 25th. But wasn't Mithras, Roman god, more ancient god? Weren't there 10 to 12 other messiahs that match all the same characteristics of the Jesus of Nazareth story that happened before the time of Jesus? Horus is Jesus, yes. That's the comparison that gets made. It's very interesting that I read a book called The Jesus Mysteries. Might want to pick it up. It was written by Timothy Freak and Peter Gandy. And they wrote this book maybe 20 years ago now, but it's still very pertinent. And in this book, they talk about, look, we grew up Christian. We're not trying to undo Christianity, but we have serious questions, they asked. And they listed in one part of the introduction of the book, they listed a bullet-pointed list and said, if we were to give you this list and ask you who we're talking about, who would you say? And they talked about the virgin birth, born to a virgin. There was an announcement to the virgin before the birth. There was a star that guided wise men to see him. They talk about some of the miracles. They talk about crucifixion, resurrection. They talk about 3 days in the belly of hell. All these things, and they all match up to the life of Jesus. And in this book, they said, if you were to say Jesus is who we're talking about with this list, you'd be wrong. This applies. It was an amalgamated list of at least 12 other Messiah types, Messianic types, who matched the story of Jesus prior to the time of Jesus. And so they weren't copycats. So the accusation could actually be made the story of Jesus was copycatted from those stories by his followers, by his disciples. I believe Jesus really existed, but perhaps not as we think he did, and not in the same way we think he did. So you've got all these stories, and I know even like first and second century church historians, like who would it be? Justin Martyr was one of them. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. Tacitus. They wrote of, I think it was Justin Martyr who actually said in the second century, if I have my date right, that all these, he explained away the 12 previous messiahs because they knew about him back then. He explained it all away in what he called diabolical mimicry. Got your tongue wrapped around that one? Diabolical mimicry. He said Satan, knowing that the real Son of God was going to come and be the Messiah to take away the sins of the earth, of the world, would be that he instituted these 12 previous messiahs. He rose them up in order to confuse the minds of humans as to who the real Messiah would be when he actually came. So it was like backwards copying, backwards mimicry, diabolical mimicry. Satan did it in order to throw people off from God's message. And you have to ask, it takes more faith for me to believe that than me to believe Jesus is just the Savior, the only begotten Son of God. So you've got all these things that start to make up this picture of Jesus the Messiah, Jesus the Christ, as maybe not being who he said he was, or who his followers said he was. And his crucifixion, of course, and resurrection are the things that are the basis for the Easter celebration. And I always wondered how the bunny rabbit came into a celebration that was supposedly started as a holiday to commemorate the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ in Christianity. And so I had a huge problem with that. And so, oh, wait, I want to see something here. 12 tribes, the zodiac. Yes, the Last Supper is allegedly also tied to astrology. Yeah, there's all this symbolism that's in everything. Everything is encoded messages, it seems. What was it Winston Churchill said? It's an enigma wrapped in a blah, 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 wrapped in a wet paper towel, or whatever he said. I can't think of his saying now. So fertility is something that comes into mind. The fertility is the resurrection, the new life, the coming of the new life. I see the connection that gets made there. But did not Christianity also usurp so many holidays along the way, where they were trying to convert the pagans and the heathens to Christianity in the early centuries? And they thought they would go out and kill them, by the way. Convert or die kind of thing. I think they were a little too overzealous with that, because they took that Old Testament wrath of God thing, that approach, and they were still in that mode. They were locked in. They were not 20th century, 21st century people. And then they thought there's got to be a better way, and so they started inviting the pagans in by saying, we'll just adopt your holiday. And they adopted their gods, their holidays, and all these things, and they made them their saints. And they cut down the old groves of sacred worship amongst the Druids and the pagans. And they built cathedrals there and chapels and places like that. Isn't it Rennes de Chateau is built on one of the most ancient Gallic groves of Celtic worship, pagan worship. And so this is the kind of stuff that was taking place. And so I always had Day of the Feast, Kansas. I was actually trying not to bring that up, but it just happens at Shock. And all right after 9/11 started the same day as the Day Feast and ended the same day. Yeah, there is some politics that you could try to ascribe. I'm staying away from that for tonight's conversation, though we could probably touch on it, because what I know about it for a fact, it could fill about that much of a thimble. And so I think we find that we can just like in Christianity, just like in spirituality, just like in Islam and everything else, we can find things that match what we want them to match. We can look at Masonic dates, Masonic, what's the word I'm looking for? Masonic influence. And you can find stories, and you can find things that match numerological stuff, astrological stuff, all of these things. And we can start to, everything can start to become the average size of an egg is 12.5 millimeters in diameter. Did you know that 12.5, when multiplied by the number of stars in Orion's belt and the surrounding head stars, equal to 3,333.3333 infinity, which really goes to the 33rd master's degree, the level 33 Mason, and also the 33rd parallel that goes around the Earth, and has the exact opposites of Mount Herman and Roswell, New Mexico. And this is what happens when we start doing that. Now, there's some smart people that figure this stuff out. For me, I get a little lost in all of it. So, no, there's nothing to be sorry for. It's adaptation. You're right about that, Kat. It's adaptation. And so then I look at modern watering down of the adaptation. We not only have adaptation from pagan religion, we have adaptation and corruption. Adaptation and corruption in the sense of the decay of the idea. It's no longer even spiritual or religious anymore. It has become an issue of Easter bunnies, peeps, marshmallow yellow chicks, and toys. My kids somehow have gotten the idea that Easter is about getting toys, because they've gotten a couple of things now and then in an Easter basket. They used to chuck it full of all kinds of surprises and little stuff. And after a while, it becomes the thing. It's no longer, does Easter mean anything to anybody? It was the same question I would ask about Christmas. Does it mean anything to anybody? Have we watered it down to just be, oh, I love you. Oh, family. Oh, turkey. Oh, here, have a gift. Oh, here. Oh, I got to spend weeks prepping for Christmas and spending hundreds to thousands of dollars on presents to make sure I get the right present for everybody. It's commercialized. Some of the fine traditions that we had, but Courier and Ives, has become the Mall of America, and online stores and shopping. So, and that would give me a problem. It gave me problems as we went along. So, moving along, I talked about in the header to this show the pre-dynastic origins, not really origins, the pre-dynastic egg, the pre-dynastic Easter egg. Because I would look at the egg and I used to think, where the hell did this symbol come from? And how does the egg relate anything to Jesus? Well, there are some old traditions, and they started as far back as ancient Egypt, pre-dynastic Egypt. Now, dynastic period, runs all the way back. You're talking, anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 years ago was pre-dynastic Egypt, pre-dynastic civilization. And one of the things they had going for them, they were, and you see it in rock carvings and inscriptions and all of this, the stories of the ostrich hunts and how valuable the ostrich was, not only for meat, but for the eggs. And the eggs were roughly about that big, very thick, hard shells. They drill holes in them at one end or both ends, and they'd empty them out. Now, you've done that before, I'm sure. When we did Ukrainian Easter eggs when I was a kid, poke a hole in either end, and you'd blow on the egg and blow all the yolk out the back end. So you emptied that thing out. Now, they would use those shells for water and things to drink. They'd store things in them, things like they'd cut them in half and use them as bowls and cups, things like that. But as they hunted, they started using them for symbolic and celebration purposes. ceremonial purposes. They would do the same thing. They'd drill the hole and they'd empty out the egg. And there's a very old Egyptian Easter called Sham el Nassim. And Sham el Nassim, it's something that was celebrated by the Egyptians since distant ancient times, regardless of religious background or social status. Aram, I'm sorry, Sham el Nassim is this old holiday. Monday, April 21st is the in this year, I think it was a couple of years ago. April 21st marked this holiday, and it's a festival that takes place in the same breath as Easter, falls on the day after Easter, Sunday, every year. So this year it's actually going to be next Monday will be this Sham el Nassim. And the rituals and the beliefs that are associated with today's Sham el Nassim celebrations link directly to ancient Egyptian feasts, like linking up a lot like Easter. The festival deals with the notions of creation and renewal. And do you remember when we were reading The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim, I talked about the egg, the sacred egg, and the Ogdode as being one of the original creation stories. And it was supposed to be the temple in Luxor of Medina, Deir el Medina, is supposed to have been constructed on the site in ancient times where the even more ancient Ogdode rose, and the egg of creation, and so on. Now, Sham el Nassim has been celebrated since 2700 BCE. And by all Egyptians, regardless of their religion and their beliefs and their social status. And the name Sham el Nassim actually means inhaling the breeze. And it's derived from the Coptic language, which is in turn derived from the ancient Egyptian language. And it was originally pronounced Sam Nissim, or with the Sam, T-S-H-O-M-E. It means gardens. And Nissim meaning the meadows. And take the deep breath in, the spring celebration. And like most ancient Egyptian feasts, it was linked to astronomy and nature, and it marked the beginning of the spring festivals. Day and night equal in length, and the sun in the Aries zodiac, marking the beginning of creation. And there's a lot of details to this, and I want to kind of bring it down. What happened was another tradition of Sham el Nassim was they would take these ostrich eggs that I talked about, and they drill the holes in them, empty them out. And while they had other practical utilitarian uses for them, they started coloring them. They would color the eggs, and it reflects the ancient Egyptian view of eggs as this symbol of new life, which still carries over into paganism, Easter, the meshing of the two, the resurrection. And the symbolism featured in the Pharaonic Book of the Dead and in Akhenaten's chant. The chant went like this. It said, God is one. He created life from the inanimate, and he created chicks from eggs. Chicks. He created chicks. Ancient Egyptians would boil eggs on the eve of Sham el Nassim. And they would decorate and color these eggs in all kinds of various patterns. They'd write their wishes on these eggs. They'd tuck them into baskets made of palm fronds. And they'd hang them on trees or on the roofs of their houses, dangling from the eaves, and hoping that the gods would answer their wishes by dawn. And the habit of eating onions also went along with this. I don't know how many kids, if you gave him an Easter egg in a basket, along with jelly beans, throw in a couple of shallots and a couple of onions, and maybe some leeks for color, and see how well that goes over. But that's an ancient tradition too. The eating of onions went along with this. And according to legend, one of the pharaoh's daughters had an incurable disease, and the doctors were clueless until a high priest gave her onion juice. And by way of medicine, and her condition improved, and her father, thrilled at her recovery, declared the day an official celebration in honor of onions. So there was an onion holiday that sprouted from all of this as well. So you can see that the practice of the egg is ancient. And let me see. I see some things: burnt, crusty, dry, soggy stack of pancakes. I don't get out too much anymore, except that it wasn't meant to fit into society. Lewis asked about the Garden of Eden. I'm not sure what I'm missing the context because I was into the story. But let's go back to this for just a second and just say this is the stuff that comes into my mind as we're coloring Easter eggs tonight. And I'm putting a Star Trek emblem, a uniform pin on my Easter egg, and a diagram of the Enterprise drawn in crayon in 2 inches. And so the egg chicken dispute versus flat Earth. Oh my goodness, Kat. You're opening up a whole nother show there. So these are the things that come into my mind as I start to practice Easter celebrations, which I love holidays. Don't get me wrong. I've gotten to the point where Halloween has become my favorite holiday. Even though that too is watered down, it's a pretty safe holiday. In respect that I don't have to go into all the spiritual mumbo jumbo behind it anymore and worry about how watered down it's been. Although it has been watered down. Halloween does not mean what it used to mean. I get tired of even public schools will do this, where my kids went to school, my little kids, and on Halloween time, they didn't want to allow them. You couldn't wear anything scary. And I said, well, that's the point of Halloween. It's supposed to be a little scary. And there are purposes for that. Now we've changed that. It's morphed into how much like a horror film can you get? How much like Michael, that kind of stuff. That to me, that's not Halloween. Halloween's is supposed to be witches and demons. It's supposed to be evil spirits and things of the like. It's jack-o'-lanterns and all of that. But I digress. Halloween has become for me one of the safer holidays. Don't have to worry about it. It's fun. It's enjoying. We know what it does in our culture. Easter to me is a crap holiday. Unless you are worshiping something, if you're worshiping God, if you're worshiping at Passover, and there's some great traditions in the Jewish faith about Passover. One thing, and I got to mention this, that always used to get me was with the Jewish faith, they would have the Seder, or the Seder, however you want to say it, and the meal at Passover. And they would always set an empty plate at the table. Now, I asked some good Jewish friends of mine that I know well in some of the communities I'm in, and they're agnostic to atheist, but they still practice this for family. They have Passover meal, and they still, even though they are not practicing the faith elements of it, they still set the empty plate at the Passover meal. It's tradition. And the empty plate, does anybody out there know who the empty plate was for? The empty plate was supposed to be for the coming Messiah, who had not yet come. And they set the plate for him. And they would have this little saying during Passover meal. They would say, next year in Jerusalem. And it was this bittersweet kind of, we're all meeting, we're gathering, we're loving each other as tradition. We're looking back on the Passover. We're having the meal together. But next year in Jerusalem, meaning the Messiah is going to come and the Messiah will bring us back home. Will bring us back to Jerusalem. The Jews are almost like the Irish in their desire to go home. Used to be to build their national homeland again. Which reminds me, have you ever, do you know what ever heard of an Irish boomerang? The Irish boomerang, you throw it out and it sings sad songs about going back home again. So anyway, so lots of encodement. Yeah, I didn't get on tonight, by the way. I hope nobody's too disappointed, because I didn't come on tonight prepped to talk about all the encoded messages and things like that. This is more, it's 10 o'clock at night here in the central United States, and I had some thoughts about coloring Easter eggs. And it sparks other thoughts, and it makes my mind go to other places. And so that's where I am tonight. Drawing no conclusions on anything, not trying to wrap and tie a big knot so you can walk away from this and go, wow, I really have had my mind expanded tonight. But, and yes, cat positive and negative are in all things. Was that when you fry them, they are not unripe anymore, says PK. Not sure what you're talking about there. Maybe onions, green tomatoes, things like that. Roma tomatoes. You know, that onion thing reminds me of, there was back when I was in the church, Baptist church, very conservative, fundamentalist Baptist church. And I went to Bible college and seminary, as most of you know, and I got my ministry days started out in the early 80s doing youth pastoring work. And I worked as a youth director, youth pastor for a big church. And really enjoyed that, working with the junior high school kids, the middle school kids, and then the high school kids. And I still have friends today from those days. Those kids, I was in seminary. I was only 22, 23 years old. They were 16 to 18 years old. So, you're only talking about a 7-8 year difference. But a lot of those kids I still know today. They will still talk to me. We're talking the early 80s, almost 40 years ago. And but I remember we had a song. There was a Christian artist named, not Steve Green, he's still alive and active today, but Keith Green, who was in some of the more conservative Baptist circles shunned. You couldn't listen to his music. He's a little too rocker, or a little too, and he wasn't rock at all. I would, if I was classify him as anything, it'd almost be rockabilly to a certain extent, but not even. Folksy. But he was a young guy, went through a conversion experience, he was already a musician, performing, and he started performing Christian music. And he had this song called You Want to Go Back to Egypt. And it was kind of funky. It had the piano that sounded almost honky sound to the song. And it was his song is kind of a comic effect song about Israel after the Exodus. And they went out into the wilderness and wandered for 40 years, and all the griping, complaining they did. And it's supposed to be Moses in a way, and part of it talking to so you want to go back to Egypt, it says, where you're safe and secure, and all of this stuff. And there's one of the lines in the song, it's kind of a bridge, because it comes right in between a verse and a chorus, and it says, eating leeks and onions by the Nile. Oh, what breath, but dining out in style. And they were, in his song, they're complaining about, we used to be able to go eat leeks and onions by the Nile. And now we're out here in the desert, and all we've got is manna. What's this manna shit? And so that's what it reminded me of, that when we were talking about onions and so on. Ruh-roh. Jesus is Audrey's friend. I'm very glad, Jesus. Do you know Buddy Christ? So, and I mock it. I make a little bit of fun, but I also say Jesus probably has a pretty good sense of humor. And if he is indeed God, he created sense of humor, so he gets it. I've come to this place, and here's a little true confessions, and some of you know this about me already. I don't know what I believe anymore about any of that. I used to be so immersed in that, and then I stepped away from it. I had too many questions that were unanswered, and it presented too many problems for me. There were too many holes in the theology, too many gaps to have to fill with unrelated matter, it seemed. And yes, it was faith. It was faith issues, and I had trouble with that. And so I stepped away from it. So Jesus was a man who allowed the Christ to manifest through him. So some say. I read a book by Deepak Chopra about Jesus. It was entitled Jesus. It was a fictional take on how Jesus of Nazareth became, or not acquired. What's the word? Is not assimilated. As he came to understand who he was, he became the Christ. There are all different kinds of things out there. Mark says, I hear that, Scotty. The more I research, the more I know I don't know anything. And as I always say, the more shit I know, the more I know I don't know shit. But Jesus was the one thing I used to not be able to touch in all of this morphing of belief systems that I've gone through. And people would ask me, and I said, I can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. I can't touch the Jesus question. But as I started looking into that even more, it gave me pause and gave me concern that there were so many holes in the theology. But then there are also the historical elements that do fall into place and make perfect sense. The Pontius Pilate thing we talked about last night, if you were here. I froze for a few seconds. At least it wasn't a 3-minute solid, knock on wood. Let's see. And I see a lot of stuff here. And I want to, because Rocky Stucci's show, the Situation Room, Rocky's Situation Room, comes on in about 13 minutes. I am not on with Rocky tonight, but I don't want to step on his show's toes. So we're going to go a few more minutes and cut it off there for those of you who want to freshen up and go over to Rocky's show. We set cookies and milk out for Santa Claus. Yeah, we do. And we damn well know he's not there. But we do it. It's like Santa to me is like Toy Story. I have no doubt in my mind that this toy will never come to life. But there are times I can set him on my desk as I'm walking out of the room and I look back and I go, hope you're still there in the morning. Not over there. Because you walked over there and didn't make it back to your spot before I walked in. You know, we have superstitions. We have funny beliefs that we have. We have little quirky things. I don't really believe my toys are going to get up and start doing their own thing when I walk out of the room. Right? And so, yet we have those superstitions. And we think the same thing, I think, about Jesus. And all of these things that we're talking about tonight, is it going to change because my wife walked in the room? So, or is it going to, I'm not too thrown off. I just lost my train of thought. That's all. I use that illustration to say, when we turn our back on it, is it going to still exist? Is it going to exist in its own terms? And I have a problem with the whole faith thing altogether. So, and my time is running out, and I didn't know where I was going to go with this tonight, and I didn't know how far I'd go. We will definitely revisit these issues again. I want to talk about some of this stuff in more detail. I'm glad you enjoy listening. Thanks, folks. I froze for a few seconds. I was looking back at this super superstitious writing on the wall. Does Jeff ever have you scratching your head too? Jeff doesn't have me scratching my head. Jeff and I have known each other for a long time, and we've talked about a lot of these things for a number of years. And he challenges me to think, and hopefully I still challenge him to think. I think we challenge each other, and we try to figure things out. Like a few weeks ago, I text messaged Jeff, and I said, have you ever heard about this thing about the staff of Arcana and how Jesus, some of the earliest Roman sculptures, pieces of art of Jesus, shows him using a wand to raise Lazarus, to multiply the loaves and fishes? And Jeff said, I never heard of that before. So Jeff just ran with it, and he studied it and researched it up a little bit. And he did a couple of shows on it. And so Jeff and I challenge each other, Lewis. And that's the way it's supposed to be. And I like that. So Disappearing chocolate eggs, jelly beans, yeah. Jeff was a further info affirmer. That's what a lot of this does. Many times, the people that we listen to, the things that stir us the most, stir us not always because it's a fresh idea that we've never heard before, but it's somebody that comes along and puts that next apple on the apple cart after we put 10 on ourselves, and somebody else goes, well, have you considered this apple? And you go, you just blew my mind, kind of thing, you know? And so that's what Jeff does for me. And I love Jeff, respect Jeff a lot. Respect Rocky a lot for a different thing. Rocky and I don't, we do different things. Rocky's not a book scholar. Rocky is a hit the streets scholar, as far as I'm concerned. And so I very much appreciate him. And it triggers a response, definitely. And thank you, PK. And so, folks, I'm going to wrap it because I didn't have a beginning to this. I didn't have a middle, and I don't have an exit strategy. And I have no music to bring us in or music to take us out. So that's it for tonight. My thoughts on coloring Easter eggs. Wanted to share with you the one historical tidbit, which was talking about the ostrich egg in ancient Egypt, and how a lot of these same traditions really started in pre-dynastic Egypt and way back in ancient times that had nothing to do with Easter, but we borrow some of the same concepts and the same practices and traditions. So think about that the next hard-boiled Easter egg you crack open and sprinkle salt on top of, or cut in half and make into deviled eggs. My favorite, by the way. I have a birthday coming up in November. I love deviled eggs. That's all I'm going to say. So, folks, we're all done for tonight. 8 minutes, 7 minutes. And Rocky Stucci is on if you're going to join him. I might come over to the chat room there and hang out a bit and make trouble in Rocky's chat room. It is Robert Bauer is going to be on tonight talking about infomedication. Infomedication, I think is the word he coined. And it's very interesting stuff. Pretty heavy duty and fits into some of the stuff we're talking about. The stuff I'm talking about fits into all of that. So there you go, folks. Yes, evil eggs are the best. Yum. So, folks, you have a good night. I will be back tomorrow night with something, hopefully a little more substantive than this was. And we'll get going again. So I appreciate you. I've grown to love you as my audience in the short time we've been doing this. And share the word, spread the word, like the video for me. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. And hit the little bells so you get notifications. It seems everybody made it here that's been here before. So I appreciate that very much. Have a good night. Talk to you tomorrow.